Lieutenant Colonel Rip Rawlings is back. Rip, you were on before talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal, and now you and your wife, Erin, who is an emergency room surgeon, right, Erin?
Correct.
Okay. You guys are both over in Poland right now, but you will be in Ukraine. You've been on the border, and you're essentially volunteering. Rip, you're covering this as a correspondent, though, now. You're out of the military, covering this now from the journalist standpoint, as somebody who's been in combat situations a lot in your lifetime. And then, Erin, I'm sure that you're seeing things you've seen in emergency rooms before, but in a very different context. And you're also a veteran. I should also add that, too. So I want to just give you guys a chance to maybe just brief us before we get into all the details on what each of your missions is there on the ground. And then we'll get into some more about what you've been up to.
So, I mean, relatively simply, we had an 80s cruise set up where we were going to go have a good time. And all of a sudden, this catastrophe happened over here in the Ukraine. And we said, we just couldn't conscience sitting around. We've got to do something about it. So we decided to can the vacation and come over here and just pitch in to try to help. And that's what we've been doing. So, our number one mission for me as a retiree and a former United States Marine is to try to get some aspect and combat perspective on what's happening, because having been in combat for 10 deployments out of 23 years, I think I've got a fairly keen idea of what it looks like and kind of what the toll is going to be.
From my standpoint, I am a physician first. I trained as a surgeon. I am a surgeon. I have a very active practice back in DC. And my goal in coming over here was to try and take care of people the best that I could, whether it was just to help them with cold medicine or to do minor surgery if I'm able to, and really give them the care that they deserve. That's fairly difficult to find, particularly in a refugee camp.
During a war.
During a war, yeah.
So you all just returned from one of the refugee camps. Can you describe what you saw there and what you did today?
So, all politics aside, what you're seeing is civilians who had nothing to do with any side of a conflict, but were just at home doing their own thing. Your average American can understand it, I think, pretty effectively. And then all of a sudden, Russia invades, and they're in their hometown of Kharkiv or in Kiev or in Mariupol, wherever. And all of a sudden, the Russians start hitting their village. They start hitting their town. They start hitting their house, their neighbors, etc. And so we're seeing refugees. It's mostly women and children. The country of Ukraine has restricted men from the age of 16 to 60 from leaving the country. They want all of those men back there helping out with everything from fire brigades to special police to being in the army. So it's a very tragic, refugee crisis where you have women, pregnant women, women with children, old grandmas that are hobbling across the border because all they want to do is get away from the fighting.
Well, and I think it's beyond that. I think they want to keep their families safe, particularly the mothers with young children and babies. We've had several babies come through that are less than a month old and less than 2 months old, which is exceedingly difficult for anybody who's a mom, a parent, but really a mom, and you're trying to figure out how to keep your child fed. This is your brand new baby that you love dearly, and the last thing you want is to have anything happen to that child. And I can't even imagine the emotions that are going on inside of the heart and minds of those mothers as they're just trying to get from point A to point B in safety. It's really quite shocking when you see them sitting in the tent waiting to go to their next step, which is another country somewhere in Poland, to relocate essentially. And I would say most women, I should say, have an incredibly vacant look in their eyes. I don't think they even know what to do with any of this. They're just trying to keep their children safe.
And their entire house is packed into one rolly bag and one backpack. That's it. That's all they had time to get out. And in some ways, part of the endearing factor to this is, we're seeing kind of nonsensical things that they threw in a bag. I think everybody in the US thinks about this a little bit, or at least, maybe there's a part prepper in some people, which is, what do I do if, from, big thunderstorm to hurricane to whatever. In these cases, we're seeing, makeup kits, we're seeing, the subway tokens, all of them, because these are precious objects to them. So you're seeing people that left in panic. They may have had all sorts of preparations, but this war hit them in the face. It has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with innocent people caught up in a war zone that's absolutely terrifying.
So 2 quick questions. It seems like it's probably pretty cold there. So how are people staying warm? Is there a regular supply of food? Is that an issue at these camps? And then also, we keep hearing stories about how Ukrainian men were forced. I don't know if this is true, but they were forced to stay and basically like drafted into fighting. So, are you seeing men or just women? Can you answer both those
No.
questions?
Yeah, so I'll say from the perspective of being in kind of the camp piece of it for the most part, and particularly in the medical tent, there's no men. It's striking because there's all these women that come in, some of them older with their moms in tow, and then the children. And that's what you see about every hour and a half to 2 hours, because they try to get everybody placed and out every 1 to 2 hours so that nobody's staying there for hours and hours on end. And unless you're over the age of 70, there's no male that we've seen that's of, younger, anywhere between 16 and 60,
16.
as said. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think there's this odd dichotomy when you talk to a lot of the civilians and say, where is dad? Where is brother? Where is son? Over the age of 16, they all say that they have, I wouldn't say they've been pressed into service, because there's still this kind of, there's a freedom in it, which is they're not allowed to leave, but they're not required necessarily to be in the military. So it's not as though they're being told at the point of a gun, you must join the Ukrainian army. Most of it, to me, talking to the wives and the grandmas, is volunteerism, which is they're very sad to drop mom and grandma and daughter off at the border, but they feel this kind of genuine internal need to make sure that they're doing what's right. So some of them are just part of the fire brigade in their local town, and they've volunteered for it. I would say the vast majority are filling in the ranks as militia and army and others, but they're untrained. I mean, these are bankers and, clerks and, people working in printing presses and just, average people, the same as we know. And all of a sudden their world is torn asunder. And so they're pitching in a million ways. I mean, just to give you an example, there's this group we're in touch with where they were all making video games in the Ukraine. And so these are, I mean, for the most part, younger men, 20, 22, 23, college or graduates of college. And they've been told, hey, you can't leave because we need folks to pitch in. Well, they've started making graphics that are kind of anti-Russian. And so we've seen these almost video game-esque, caricatures of, this is what you're going to do. This is what we're going to do as the Ukrainian people against the Russians. So, I mean, people are pitching in ways that are not necessarily just filling in the ranks as cannon fodder. These are people that, just as we would in the United States if we're invaded, are doing everything they can. I mean, a lot of it is offensive. We've seen videos of grandma and granddad and younger kids sitting in the town square and making Molotov cocktails. And to be honest with you, it's tough, not to commiserate with that and say, that's what we would be doing in the United States if we were invaded by Russia.
Before we get to the rest of this video, don't forget you can support my work by also checking out my sponsors and having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee in honor of free speech. The first is AllisonWinePromo.com, Allison with 1L winepromo.com. You get 50% off of my favorite Argentinian Malbecs and 50% off of shipping. They have switched out the 3 bottles from the last pairing, so check them out. Many of these are high altitude wines. They're very robust. They use no flavoring, no filtering, no dyes, and no excess chemicals. But if you need something to wake you up, like a strong cup of coffee, check out twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. They've got a wide variety of roasts. These are high altitude, shade grown Nicaraguan coffees that are also USDA certified organic. Check out my sponsors and support free speech wherever you are. It seems daunting that people would be fighting a war with Molotov cocktails, given what I've seen of them on May Day in Seattle. I'm curious, as a combat veteran, and both of you have been in combat zones, so How does this compare to other war zones that you've been in?
I mean, so first off, I'm seeing a huge amount of American volunteerism. The vast majority of the US citizens that I've seen have, I mean, we've seen a fair amount, and they have their old, fatigues or their uniforms from their service in the military. And most of those guys are going very far out west. I'm a 51-year-old, so I'm a little older, but I understand their heart, which is these are American veterans who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they are going out to fight the Russians in Kiev. And if you ask them, it's funny because as well as I do, being married to a Marine, is that veterans know veterans. So we ran into about 6 just in the airport when we flew in last Friday, and some of them are kind of cagey about what they're up to, but once you break the ice and they're like, oh, you were a colonel in the United States Marine Corps, before you know it, you freely talking, and you're like, what are you up to, bro? Where are you going? I mean, I won't repeat any names, that kind of thing, but I will say they are going to join arms. They're doing the Hemingway thing. They're going to pick up a rifle and they're going to go shoot Russians. We are seeing a huge amount of European volunteerism for more of the humanitarian side. I interviewed today on Twitter and Facebook and all 2 kids from Belgium. I mean, these are kind of suave dudes that are just hanging out in their college years, literally told me they had this van tricked out to go take to Canada to do a Canadian road trip for a year, and instead decided to kind of demodify all the stuff they'd done, fill it full of goods, show up at the border, and they're, probably the hardest workers on the border right now. These are just kids from Belgium. We ran into a German opera singer today. Her name was Agnieszka. Beautiful. I mean, her voice is amazing. And she was at home and she said, I just had this thing in my stomach, which we both understood, where I could not sleep at night to just think that Putin was getting away with this. Someone has to do something, even if I do nothing besides help out a little bit. So she said, well, I've got 3 criteria that would make me go. Otherwise, I'm just going to stay home because I've got a family, I've got a career. She said, if I ask my husband, he says, stay home, I'll stay home. I'll ask my daughter if she says, stay home, I'll stay home. I'll ask the opera if I should stay home. If they say stay home, I will. Well, all 3 of them said go. And she was working in the medical tent today. She speaks Russian fluently. And no, she's not a spy. She speaks German fluently. She speaks English fluently, and she speaks Polish fluently. And so she's literally like translating, running medical gear, helping, humanitarian aid groups get together with each other. And you're like, this is what it's all about when there's a humanitarian crisis and the governments aren't doing anything about it. People, real people, and a lot of veterans pitch the heck in and do the right thing.
Okay, just quick question. How does an American veteran legally go fight on the Ukraine side against Russia and not get charged with murder? You know what I mean? How do you just say, I'm going to just go fight a war in another country? You just show up and say, I'm here. And well, how does that even work? That just seems weird. I mean, if a Ukrainian came here, you wouldn't just let him in the military. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, I don't know. It seems odd to me.
So, I mean, I'll answer that. Well, so the first thing we found out is that if anybody who served more than 20 years who has a pension does it, it voids your pension. So Erin told me, if you go shoot people and don't do, press work, by the way, I'm good press. If you hate press, I'm a different kind of press. I'm a veteran doing press. So hopefully a different, I've seen a lot of vets that are doing press and they're impressive, pun intended, meaning they're looking at it from a humanitarian perspective. They've seen the worst of war, and, kind of being on the other side is a good thing. But Erin told me, I lose the pension, I lose the college funds for the kids, I lose everything if I go shoot. So the big thing that I have that goes boom is my camera. But no, it actually is pretty easy. We ran into a lot of guys. We're still running into them on a regular basis. They are all veterans. And you fly over here, you have a legitimate passport. All you have to do is cross the borders. The border from Poland into Ukraine is open. Poland has said that they're not going to stop anybody that has the right to cross. So they're upholding their own constitution. They're not trying to restrict people, if you will. I mean, we had a little trouble in Amsterdam where we got quizzed, and I think they thought we were mercenaries, and we were stopped for a while and detained, and they guess recognize the haircut. I have a military ID. I try not to wear any military clothing, but they were kind of all over us. I mean, there were some young dudes who figured we were going to be mercenaries, but I'm like, you go talk to the 12 guys that I just talked to in the airport. We're kind of old timers, but yeah, if you cross the border, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has said, all you have to do is get over here. We'll give you a uniform. We'll give you a weapon. And I've seen some really tough customers, and I've been in touch with a few folks that are good acquaintances of mine who, I mean, I'll put it this way, they were top shots for me in Iraq. And now they're going to be, I mean, Russia beware, because these are dudes that I wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. Hell, I trained a couple of them to do some of those things in a dark alley. And now they want to go do it downrange. And it's like, power to you. Go do what you got to do if your heart tells you to do it. And yeah, they'll let you across. Zelensky will put you in the military. You have to kind of prove that you're the guy that you say you are. If you're just some, chuckle knock out of wherever who doesn't have the skills, they'll find out pretty quickly. But there's a lot of guys showing up. They had, I think, a total of 7,000 as of today, foreign military members that have joined the Ukrainian army.
Okay, I'm going to try to figure out how to keep this question short, but bear with me if it takes a little bit of wind up. So in the States right now, the way that this narrative is kind of rolling out is very, very much like black and white. I would say this would be like the popular narrative would be Putin bad, Zelensky good, Russia bad, Ukraine good. And obviously, there's opposition to that narrative too. That actually there was a lot of complicated history that bled into this, that this could have been avoided. NATO, coups, I won't even go into it. Suffice to say that the comment section, as I was kind of saying before we started recording, you see it's starting to see how people are sort of choosing their sides on this one. Basically I could see somebody saying, that's great that American veterans are signing up. And I could see another person saying, that's crazy that American veterans are signing up. And I'm curious what you all are running into as far as how people are thinking through this there. Like, one person commented on my locals that Americans are always so, narcissistic about foreign conflict. We either, are whipping ourselves for being the enemies of all things around the world, or we're celebrating that we always save everybody around the world, that, but it's always about us. And, maybe this isn't about, the United States, but it kind of is. I would say a lot of people look at it that way. Either, listen, we aggravated this situation, and what did we expect Putin to do? Or the mainline narrative that I think a lot of people are wary of after COVID, when you start seeing the presidential administration saying something that the media is all saying at the same time. The Seattle Great Wheel is colored like the Ukraine flag. And people go, wait, like I heard Laura Logan say the other day, I've never seen bumper stickers come out so fast for a war. And I've covered a lot of foreign conflicts, and my BS meter is going off big time on this one. So I'm just curious what you guys are seeing there. Do you see a divide among people, like, maybe not those who would be the refugees, but as you're talking to people kind of about this situation, what, is it very black or white there? Or do you have people arguing about, who or what led to this? I just curious if it's our media and our situation, or if you have this debate going on there locally.
Yeah.
So
no,
go ahead.
Did that make sense?
What I will tell you is, I would say 100% everyone that is, at least where we are in the refugee camp, is 100% on the side of Ukraine. They are deeply angry with Russia, and they are willing to do whatever they need to do in order to help the Ukrainians and to get them through this situation, and also to potentially help them win the war. I mean, every country you can think of is sending military supplies and aid to the folks in Ukraine. These same countries are sending relief supplies to our refugee camp, and there's other camps. And I don't think there's a person on the continent that believes that this is an appropriate action or response. And I think part of that is because they're at the end of the day, everybody's pretty close together in Europe. There's not a lot of distance between Russia and many of these other countries. And I don't think any of them want to have that type of conflict with that particular country.
Yeah. I mean, I'll add to this, which is almost to the last person that we've spoken to, everybody's apolitical. Well, let me put it a different way, because that's probably minimizing it. Everybody hates politicians. So it doesn't matter if it's the German aid workers that showed up, the Austrian aid workers that showed up, the former Russian dude who now is doing, support and aid at the border, the Poles that are working. It's like, to the last person, they kind of believe that the reason that we're here is because politicians suck and they've failed. And so it's kind of this universal of, this is now a human element, and who cares about politics, because there's a 2-month-old baby with her mom who just left Kharkiv. This was a heartbreaking story. I spoke to this woman just yesterday, and she was mad to the point of violence. All of her friends are picking up arms. She had a baby to take care of that's 2 months old. So I take nothing away from the fact that she decided to leave. Her husband, by the way, and her dad are still back there fighting. And I asked her, I said, well, do you blame Putin? Do you blame, I went down the kind of the political ladder of who do you blame at the top? And her comment, I think, encompasses all of them, which is, and I won't use any bad language because I know we're kind of rated G here, but it was like, I don't give a bleep bleep who, all of them suck. Every one of them caused this. Now I'm here with my baby. And so for us, and I think for a lot of veterans, it's the same thing. It's like, at some point, shut up about politics, because there's a baby that needs help. That baby didn't vote for anybody. The baby didn't do anything to cause this. This is a little baby. We're seeing dogs. We're seeing little kids. They didn't vote for any of this. And don't say their moms and dads did either, because most of these are Ukrainians who just have been doing the same thing as a lot of Americans, which is kind of ignoring politics because they hate politicians. I mean, there's one thing that you could find a commonality with between United States citizens and the Ukrainian citizens, is we hate politicians. And so they're like, I don't have anything to do with any of this. I just had my city blown up and I just want to, live a normal life. And in a lot of cases, their lives are now in a suitcase, and their husband, every male from 16 to 60 that is related to them, is going to sit up, dig a trench, and fire a missile at a Russian tank in the next 10 days.
Well, and they're being moved to different countries where they don't know the language, and they don't know anybody there, and they're being placed in homes with people that have large hearts and are welcoming, but it's not your country, it's not your house, it's not the people that you know. And I think that creates a panoply of emotions. I mean, anger, stress, sadness, nostalgia. It really is a lot for the human mind to bear, and I'm not sure that that's fair. I don't think it's fair.
These are the most innocent of innocents, and I think we all understand they didn't have anything to cause this. They just need help.
Is there anything else that you all feel like may not be getting out there? Any particular stories you'd like to share of individuals, or things that just surprised you while you were there, or things that you think maybe folks outside that area would benefit from knowing that maybe we're not getting? I know you're not watching our news back home here or anywhere else, but just, any last, I guess, specific stories or things that sort of challenge your own preconceived notions, or you think might challenge ours, given what we're hearing where we are.
I mean, so I would say there's two things. Number one is, it's very interesting to see, at a time when America is so divided, a Europe that is so united. And of course, we're seeing people, that are at the tip of the spear to try to do something. So, your average European back at his house watching, whatever TV he's watching is probably just as jaded as the United States, any American citizen. But so I would categorize, I've seen about 4 or 5 different types of children pass. And this is another unifying thing that I think every American will connect with. I've seen children that, when they've crossed the border, are so frightened of new things that they cover their stuffed animals' eyes, because that's what mom and dad have done to them all the way across Ukraine just to get out. And so now their reflex when they see something different and scary is to kind of cover their little toy stuffed animal, because it's scary. And who knows what they've seen through mom's fingers. I've seen the little boy and little girl, generally under the age of 7, I say, who just has this blank stare, the same as the 19, 20, 21-year-olds that I've led in combat in Fallujah and Ramadi in Iraq and Bagram in Afghanistan. And a 7-year-old shouldn't have that look, but they have a vacant stare. They've seen so many traumatic events that they just don't understand what's going on in the world. I've seen the child that's bold and tough and is ready to fight because they have it in them, and that's their instinct. And, typically these are the parents, the parents of the child are the ones that are kind of holding them back and saying, this is not a time, you're not of age, and you need to take it down, because they're frustrated. These kids are the kind that back in the United States would throw a tantrum when something went wrong, but here they're expressing their rage and their outrage against, President Putin and his policies and his attack by saying, I want to fight. It's encouraging to see a 9-year-old that wants to do that, but also at the same time very discouraging. So, the range of emotions from innocence to me is something that's new for both of us. We've seen war where young men who are volunteers and women go off to fight a war that our country has told us to go fight. In this case, we're seeing a range of emotions from 16-year-olds and under that are non-combatants and have zero to do with politics, that should not be in the visage, in the viewpoint of a 16 to below. I talked to a college girl the other day. This is the one I kind of gave an example of, where I said, what did you bring? What did you take? I'm trying to take the aim of a sympathetic reporter, where I try to smile. It's very hard to do. Her dad was with her. Her dad is a pensioner. He's over 60, and he played the harmonica for us, and he had helped his wife and his daughter escape from Ukraine. And I asked if I could interview the whole family, and the daughter said, I said, what did you bring? She goes, I was so scared, all I did was grab my subway tokens. Because to her, it's hard to talk about. That was her symbol of independence. She doesn't own a car like a lot of American, young men and women do. She's in college for design and for interior design. And all of a sudden, her neighbors were blowing up. The neighborhood was getting blown up. So she grabbed what she could, and that was her symbol of independence. She stuffed it all in a bag. She showed it to me, and I thought, I want to throw up. I'm so sad for the fact that here's this young lady that should be studying something smart by day and looking for a soulmate by night. And here the windows are vibrating. Her neighbor's house just got completely demolished. And all she can think is to throw all her subway tokens in a bag and get away. That's how much time they had. It's just, now all of a sudden the war is here. It's happening that quickly. And the Russians, in my impression, and maybe I'm biased as a journalist in that case, are the aggressor and are committing what I would consider to be very heinous war crimes against an innocent population.
Erin, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think the biggest thing that's a takeaway for everybody is that these folks are under a lot of duress as they're moving from the Ukraine over to Poland in the area where we are. They oftentimes don't have their medications. They have chronic illnesses that need to be dealt with, and it's very hard to do in a refugee camp. So we try to patch them up and get them on their way to a more permanent location, at least for now. But I think they are not being given all the help that they can, mainly because we can't give it. We have very limited resources, and they also don't deserve to have this happen to them in terms of their health, because they aren't able to take their medicines and have the care that they would have with their physicians and other doctors.
Exactly to your point, because Erin and I were talking about this. How many people have died just to trek out of their own country? How many Americans, if you told them you have to flee to Canada in whatever conveyance you can get a hold of? Most of these people are going by foot, 60, 80 miles by foot or more. And, you think about your average American, over the age of 60 or under the age of 16. How many of them are going to make it? So there's going to be a trail of tears of people trying to escape, and it's heartrending. And I think every American can understand these are innocents in their truest form.
I worry that we're at a time where we've lost empathy because of how divided, at least I know my audience extends beyond the United States, but in the United States, at least, I feel like we've completely lost empathy for those who would be caught in a situation that, we disagree with, that we're just losing that connection. It concerns me. And so I appreciate you guys sharing your side of it. Where can people follow you?
Well, so we're both on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. It's at Rip Rawlings. I'm on Instagram, and I've got my own webpage, riprawlings.com. But I write books and I write war journals, and that's kind of what I do. And Erin's a surgeon in Washington Hospital Center. So if you need any kind of general surgery, I recommend her.
Okay. Quick plug. Yeah. If you happen to need emergency surgery and you're watching this video while you're on your way to the hospital in the ambulance, when she gets back, go check out Erin. Okay. Thank you both. I hope you stay safe, and
thank you.
Maybe we'll circle back when you get back.
Okay. Thanks, Allison. Good to talk to you.